The moon of Verun was burning. Columns of black smoke rose in the distance, folding into the low, bruised clouds. Buildings that had once been shining towers of glass and steel now lay cracked and leaning, like bones after a battle too long fought. The air was thick with the taste of ash, and somewhere overhead, the dull thud of orbital bombardments rolled like a slow heartbeat. Carrion of the Veyari was on her knees amid the rubble, her clawed hands digging into the fractured ground. Her breath came ragged through her sharp beak, and the smell of scorched flesh clung to her nostrils. She had been hit by shrapnel from a human grenade, both legs shredded below the knee. She had fought through worse wounds before, but never this. Never something that took her movement, her power, the very thing that defined her as a Veyari warrior. Her blood, rich and deep gold, pooled beneath her, soaking into the dust. Around her, the rest of her squad gathered in a loose circle. Their armor glinted in the firelight, but none of them stepped forward. No hands reached for her. No medic crouched to tend her wounds. Their leader, Captain Rizak, didn't even look her in the eye when he spoke. "You cannot walk. You cannot fight. To carry you would slow us, and the enemy will strike again soon. Die well, Carrion." She stared at him in disbelief. "You would leave me." The captain's voice was cold, flat, nothing but the iron echo of the Veyari code. The sky rights forbid burdening the living with the dead weight of the dying. One by one, her squad turned their backs. Without ceremony, they melted into the ruins, weapons ready, armor plates clinking. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but something far worse: abandonment. Carrion gritted her beak against the pain and dragged herself toward the shadows, refusing to give the humans the satisfaction of an easy kill. Her claws scraped stone. Her body felt heavier with each pull. She didn't cry out. She wouldn't. Hours later, or maybe minutes, time had blurred. She heard footsteps, soft, cautious, not the heavy march of her own kind. Her hand tightened on the grip of her sidearm. A human stepped into view. His armor was battered, the white paint streaked with dirt and blood. A Marine sergeant judging from the insignia. He carried his rifle low, scanning the area before his eyes found her. He froze, not with the cold stare of an enemy, but with surprise. Carrion bared her teeth at him. "Finish it," she rasped. "You want a trophy? Take it." He didn't raise his weapon. Instead, he crouched beside her, his shadow falling across her broken form. "You're hurt bad," he said. His voice was low, steady. Human words she didn't fully understand, but the tone was unmistakable. Concern. She spit on the ground between them. "My own kind left me. What makes you think I'd want help from yours?" The Marine's jaw tightened. "Because leaving someone to die like this isn't what I'd do." Before she could argue, he slid his rifle onto his back and began checking her wounds with careful, practiced movements. His hands were warm through his gloves, his touch firm but not cruel. He tore strips from his own undershirt to bind what was left of her legs. Carrion tried to push him away, but her strength was fading. "Fool, you'll slow yourself. You'll die." "Maybe," he said, meeting her gaze, "but you won't." Something in his eyes unsettled her. Not pity, not weakness, but a stubborn, quiet resolve she didn't understand. The kind of resolve that made him kneel in enemy territory to help a warrior who might still try to kill him. And so, in the dying light of a burning world, a human Marine made a choice no Veyari ever would: to stay.
Alex Carter had found many strange things in war. Alien weapons that hummed with living energy, ruins older than his species, skies that bled colors Earth had no name for. But he'd never found himself patching up a reptilian avian warrior who still looked at him like she was deciding whether to slit his throat. The bunker was half collapsed, its ceiling sagging under the weight of debris. It smelled of scorched metal and damp stone, with a faint undercurrent of smoke from the burning city above. The entrance was just a narrow crack between fallen slabs, a perfect hiding place for now. Karen sat against the far wall, her golden eyes locked on him as he worked. She'd stopped protesting, but her pride hung in the air between them like static. "You've got fractures here," Alex muttered, securing the last of the makeshift splints to what remained of her legs. "Infection's a bigger risk than bleeding out now." Her crest feathers twitched in irritation. "You think I care about infection?" "You will if it kills you before the enemy does." He glanced up briefly, holding her gaze. "I'm not doing this for a thank you." "Good," she said sharply. "You won't get one." Alex almost smiled, not from amusement, but because the fire in her voice meant she wasn't giving up yet. He respected that. When the dressing was finished, he checked the small pile of scavenged supplies: 2 ration packs, 1 cracked water canteen, and a few charge cells for his rifle. Not nearly enough. "We're low on everything. I'll have to go topside." "You'll be seen. You'll be killed." He shrugged, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Better me moving than both of us starving down here." Her gaze sharpened. "Why?" "Because no one gets left behind," Alex said simply. "Not on my watch." Her feathers stiffened, the Veyari equivalent of a frown. "That is not our way." "I've noticed," he said, stepping toward the narrow exit. He was gone for over an hour. Karen sat in the dark, every sound outside tightening the coil in her chest. She told herself she didn't care if he returned. A human death would mean little. And yet when footsteps finally scraped against the rebel and his shadow appeared in the crack, something like relief slid into her chest before she could stop it. Alex ducked back inside, breathing hard. A fresh cut bled along his cheek, but his arms were full. Bottled water, nutrient paste, and a tattered blanket. "Not much," he said, setting them down, "but enough to keep you alive a while longer." She narrowed her eyes. "You risked your life for this?" "Yeah." He tore the blanket into strips, folding one into a pillow for her head. "Seems worth it to me." Karen didn't answer. The truth was, her people would never do the same. Among the Veyari, the weak slowed the strong. A warrior who couldn't fight was already dead in spirit. But watching this human, bruised, tired, bleeding, move with such matter-of-fact determination stirred something unfamiliar in her. That night, the ruins above were quiet. Alex sat by the wall, cleaning his rifle by the faint glow of a dying lantern. Karen's eyes drifted closed by herself. Before sleep claimed her, she asked quietly, "What is your name, human?" He looked up, surprised. "Alex Carter. Yours?" She hesitated, then said, "Karen." "Karen," he repeated, slow and careful, as though the syllables were something worth remembering. For the first time since she had fallen, she did not feel entirely alone.
Days bled into one another inside the bunker, marked only by the distant rumble of artillery and the occasional flash of light seeping through the cracks in the rubble. Alex kept himself busy. He rationed the food and water, kept Carrie-Ann's bandages clean, and made short, silent trips into the ruins to scavenge. Each time he left, she listened to the muffled sounds above, her stomach tightening in ways she didn't care to name. When he returned, they would eat in silence at first. But silence in a war zone has a way of becoming heavier than noise. One night, after swallowing the last bite of nutrient paste, Alex spoke without looking at her. "You ever think about what you'll do after the war?" She stared at him, the question so foreign it almost felt like an insult. After? Yeah, when the fighting's done. Carrion's crest feathers shifted uneasily. There is no after for a Veyari warrior. We fight until we fall. That is our purpose. That's not much of a life, Alex said. It is our honor. He didn't argue, just gave a small nod. But later, when he told her about his sister back on Earth, a student who dreamed of teaching children, she found herself listening more closely than she intended. Humans, she realized, fought for something beyond the fight itself. The next day, with the sounds of battle distant for once, Alex returned from scavenging carrying something unexpected, a dented metal tin. He set it in front of her. "What is this?" she asked. "Tea. Found it in a wrecked shop." He poured hot water from his small field heater, and the air filled with a sharp, earthy scent. Carrion hesitated before taking a sip. The bitterness was strange, but it carried warmth through her chest. She said nothing, but Alex caught the slight softening in her gaze. Later, she decided it was her turn to give something. She told him of the sky rites, the sacred tradition where a young Veyari leaps from the highest cliff in their nesting range and rides the updrafts on glider wings. It is how we greet the sky as warriors. We do it before our first battle. It reminds us we belong to the wind, not the ground. Alex smiled faintly. "Sounds like the closest thing you've got to flying." Her feathers lifted in mild offense. "It is flying." They both laughed then, soft, cautious sounds that seemed to disturb the bunker less than the silence had. As the hours passed, their exchanges became easier. She asked about Earth's oceans, and he asked about the colors of Veyari's sunsets. She described gold and crimson horizons so bright they hurt the eyes, and he spoke of the salt wind off the Pacific coast. But the war didn't let it forget itself. That night, a sound scraped against the rebel above, too deliberate to be the wind. Alex motioned for her to stay quiet, slipping to the entrance with his rifle ready. Carrion waited, heart pounding, straining to hear through the muffled ringing in her damaged ears. After a tense minute, he returned, scanning the shadows. "Scavenger drones. They hunt heat signatures. If they find us—" He didn't finish the sentence. Her throat tightened. For the first time, she wished she could stand, take her weapon, and fight beside him. Instead, she could only say, "Then do not leave me here to face them alone." He looked at her for a long moment, and something unspoken passed between them. "Not a chance," he said. And in the dim bunker, surrounded by ruin, the alien warrior who had once seen him as an enemy began to understand why this human stubbornness felt less like foolishness and more like a shield she wanted near. The third night after the scavenger drones first appeared, the air in the bunker seemed heavier. Even the soft hiss of Kareen's breathing felt too loud. Alex sat near the entrance crack, his rifle in his lap, scanning the faint blue light of the ruined street outside. Every so often, a faint hum trembled through the air, as if the city itself had grown restless. "They're closer," Kareen whispered. He didn't turn. "Yeah." The hum swelled, low and mechanical, followed by the faint click of jointed legs on stone. A sliver of light, cold, sterile, slid across the bunker's entrance. Alex moved quickly, but quietly. He grabbed the blanket, throwing it over Corinne, then pulled a slab of broken wall into place, sealing her in shadow. "What are you?" she started, but his hand pressed lightly to her shoulder. "Stay still," he mouthed. The drone's scanning beam swept inside. It was the size of a large hound, its frame skeletal and bristling with weapon mounts. Its optical lens rotated, clicking softly as it adjusted focus. Alex's breath slowed to match the darkness. The machine paused, its head jerking slightly toward the heat signature of the Marine kneeling in the shadows. He could feel the weight of its attention, a predator deciding if it had found prey. Corinne's claws flexed beneath the blanket, her instincts screaming to act, to defend, but her legs were dead weight, and she could only watch through a gap in the fabric. The drone clicked again, then began to move toward him. Alex didn't hesitate. In one smooth motion, he raised his rifle and fired a short, muffled burst into its lens. Sparks sprayed like cold fire. The machine convulsed, staggered back, and collapsed in a screech of torn metal. The echoes died. The city above returned to its haunted silence. Corinne pushed the blanket off and glared at him, though her eyes betrayed something else, something closer to fear. "You could have been killed." He slung the rifle over his shoulder, breathing hard. "So could you. That thing finds us. Neither of us walks away." She stared for a long moment. "You risked yourself again. Why?" Alex knelt beside her, checking the bandages without looking up. "Because that's what you do for someone you're not ready to lose." The words struck her harder than the sound of the gunfire. Not ready to lose. Not mission objective, not asset, but someone. She didn't know what to say. No one in her life, comrade, captain, or kin, had ever put themselves between her and danger without it being their duty. And here was this human who owed her nothing but an enemy's death, making that choice over and over again. Her voice was quieter when she spoke again. "Your people, are they all like this?" Alex gave a tired half-smile. "Some are. Most try to be." Corinne tilted her head, her golden eyes studying him as if seeing him not as a human, but as Alex. She wanted to tell him that her people had no word for what he kept doing, no word for this relentless, self-imposed loyalty. Instead, she only said, "I hope your kind survives this war." He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "I hope we both do." That night, neither of them slept much. The broken drone lay just beyond the entrance, its carcass gleaming in the moonlight, like the shadow of a choice they could not undo. And somewhere, deeper in the city, another mechanical hum began to rise. By the fifth day in the bunker, Kyrene's breathing had changed. It was faster now, shallow, and her golden skin beneath the feathers along her neck had dulled to a pallid bronze. Alex noticed before she did, the faint tremor in her claws, the way her eyes seemed to drift before snapping back into focus. "Infection," he muttered under his breath as he checked her bandages. The edges were hot and angry red, the wound seeping to the cloth. Kyrene caught the tension in his movements. "It's nothing. I've fought through worse." Alex didn't look at her. "Not without proper med care, you haven't." He dug through his pack until he found the small, sealed injector from his personal med kit. Broad-spectrum antibiotics, 1 dose left. The kind of thing Marines were told to save for themselves if they wanted to live. She saw it in his hand, and her feathers bristled. "No, you need that." He met her gaze evenly. "Not as much as you do." "You're wounded too," she snapped, glancing at the stitched gash along his side from the last supply run. "You bleed every day." "Yeah, but I can still walk." His tone left no room for argument. "If I don't use this on you now, you won't last 2 more days." Kyrene's claws dug into the floor. "It is dishonorable," she hissed, "among the Veyari, to save another at your own expense, especially one who cannot fight, is shameful." Alex's voice softened. "Then maybe your people got that part wrong." Her breath caught, and for a moment neither spoke. Then, before she could stop him, he pressed the injector to the joint of her shoulder and triggered the dose. She flinched, more from shock than pain. "Why?" she demanded again, but it came out quieter this time. "Because I'm not ready to watch you die," he said simply. The words sank into her like water into dry soil, unwelcome, confusing, yet impossible to ignore. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever meant it like that. She turned her face away, but he saw her blink hard, saw the way her throat moved as if swallowing something too heavy. For hours after, they sat in near silence, broken only by the distant sounds of battle. He worked on cleaning his rifle. She traced a claw absently over the dented tin of tea he'd brought her days ago. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "If I die here, remember me not as a warrior of the Vayaris. Remember me as Kyrene." He looked up at her then, and she saw something in his expression that unsettled her more than any battlefield. It wasn't pity. It was something deeper. "I'll remember you," he said, "exactly as you are." Outside, the war raged on. Inside, something fragile had begun to grow in the cracks between them, something her people had no name for. That night, Kyrene dreamed not of her sky rights, not of battle or honor, but of standing on an alien shore, the wind off the ocean in her face, and a human at her side. When she woke, the fever had broken. It happened on the morning of the 9th day. Alex had just returned from another cautious scavenging run when Kyrene's head tilted sharply, crest feathers twitching. "Do you hear that?" she asked. He stopped, listening. A faint metallic rhythm carried through the ruins, bootsteps, too measured to be scavenger drones. The sound was coming closer. Kyrene's pulse quickened. "Those are Vayari boots," she whispered. Minutes later, the narrow entrance to the bunker darkened, and 3 tall, armored figures stepped inside. Their armor was unscathed, their stance confident. The leader bore the black crest of a Vayari captain, Razak. Kyrene's relief was immediate and visceral. "Captain," she began, her voice almost breaking. Razak's gaze slid over her, pausing only a fraction before landing on Alex. "Human," he said, coldly. "Step away from her." Alex's grip on his rifle tightened. "She's injured. She needs evac." "She cannot walk," Razak replied, as if stating the weather. "We do not carry the dying." Kyrene froze. You would still leave me?" Razak's voice was calm, unyielding. "You have fought well, Kyrene. The sky will honor you, but your body will only slow us. We move for the front lines within the hour." Alex stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "You can't be serious. She's alive. She can be treated." "She is finished," Razak cut in, voice like stone. "You may come with us, human. Leave her, and you might survive." For a heartbeat, the only sound was the distant crack of artillery. Then Alex said, "No." The Vayari captain tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. "You would defy your own survival for an enemy?" "She's not my enemy," Alex said, his voice steady but sharp. "Not anymore." The Vayari captain regarded him with something like pity. "Then you are a fool." When Razak moved as if to step past him, Alex raised his rifle, not quite aimed, but enough to make the point. "You're not taking her away from me, and you're not leaving her here to die." The other 2 soldiers shifted uneasily, their weapons half lifted. Kyrene's breath caught in her throat. She knew Vayari standoffs well enough to recognize when blood was about to spill. "Alex," she said softly, "don't." But he didn't lower his weapon. "Go," he told the captain, "before this turns into something you'll regret." Razak steadied him for another long moment, then gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "May the sky judge you both."
Without another word, he turned, and the three Vayari left the bunker the way they'd come, boots fading into the distance until the silence returned. Alex finally lowered his rifle, exhaling slowly. Cairn's eyes were wide, unreadable. "You just threatened your life against my own captain." He shrugged, setting the rifle aside. "I told you, no one gets left behind." She looked away, but her voice was raw when she said, "You've broken every code I was raised to believe in." He glanced at her. "Maybe it's time for a new one." For a long while after, neither spoke. But something had shifted irreversibly. Her loyalty was no longer bound by the sky rights, and his protection of her was no longer just a soldier's duty. When the next shell hit somewhere in the distance, Cairn found herself wishing, not for rescue, but for the strength to walk beside him when they finally escaped. By the time the sun rose behind the smoke, Alex had already made up his mind. They couldn't stay in the bunker any longer. Supplies were nearly gone, the scavenger drones were sweeping wider with each pass, and Karen's fever, though broken, had left her too weak to stand. He'd overheard chatter on a human comms channel 2 nights ago, a regrouping point 3 miles west, past the industrial district. It might as well have been 30 miles. Still, he worked through the morning, scavenging metal scraps and a bent sheet of plating from nearby rubble. By midday, he had built something that looked like it might hold together. A sled, crude but sturdy enough to carry her. Karen watched him work in silence until he began tightening the last strap. "You mean to drag me through the open?" she asked. He nodded. "We move at dusk, less chance of being spotted." "You'll kill yourself before we reach your people." "Maybe," he said, meeting her eyes, "but I'm not leaving you here." Her chest tightened, but she didn't argue. She had learned by now that Alex's resolve was like stone. It didn't bend, it only broke if he did. When dusk came, he helped her onto the sled, tucking the blanket around her to keep out the cold. She gripped her rifle, her last defense if it came to it, and tried not to think about the humiliation of being pulled like wounded prey. The first stretch was the worst. The cracked streets were littered with debris, and every scrape of metal on stone sounded like an alarm. Alex moved in bursts, pausing in the shadows of burnt-out buildings whenever the distant hum of a drone grew louder. By the second mile, sweat streaked his dust-covered face. His breaths came ragged, each pull of the sled a small battle. "You need to rest," Karen said finally. He shook his head without slowing. "If I stop now, I might not start again." "You'll collapse." "Not before we get there." Something inside her broke then. Not the stubborn pride of a warrior, but the last barrier she'd held between them. She realized that somewhere along the way, this human had stopped being a rescuer and become hers. Halfway through the industrial district, the shadows shifted. Karen's eyes snapped to the movement. 2 scavenger drones gliding between the wreckage, their scanners sweeping. "Alex!" she warned. He dropped behind a heap of twisted metal, the sled tucked against him. The drones passed close enough that Karen could see the reflection of her own face in their lenses. She gripped her rifle, ready to draw their fire if they turned. But they didn't. After an agonizing minute, they moved on, their hum fading into the ruins. Alex didn't speak when he stood again. He just adjusted his grip on the sled rope and kept moving. The last half-mile was uphill, the street fractured into jagged slabs. Alex stumbled more than once, catching himself on his knees before pushing up again. His hands were bleeding from the rope, his lips cracked from thirst. "Alex, stop," she said, her voice almost breaking. I can't let you die for me." He glanced back at her, eyes dark but steady. "You don't get to decide that." When they finally crested the hill, the glow of human camp lights flickered in the distance. Alex's knees buckled, but he forced himself forward, one step at a time, until the first sentry shouted in surprise. Karen's vision blurred as soldiers rushed to meet them. She heard voices, orders barked, boots pounding, and then felt the sled lurch away. The last thing she saw before her strength gave out was Alex, swaying on his feet, refusing to let go of the rope until he was sure she was safe. The medbay was warm, bright, and smelled faintly of antiseptic. After days of smoke, blood, and cold concrete, The clean air almost made Kyrene dizzy. She lay in a bed designed for human patience, the sheets too soft, the pillows sinking beneath her head. The human medics had replaced her bandages with sleek white polymer wraps that emitted a gentle hum, regenerative gel at work. For the first time since the blast took her legs, she could imagine healing. But she didn't care about the bed, or the wraps, or even the warmth. Her eyes searched the room until they found him. Alex sat 2 beds away, shirtless except for the bandages swathing his ribs and shoulders. His head was bowed, hair damp from a recent scrub, and his hands rested on his knees, knuckles raw from rope burns. He looked tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. "You should be lying down," Kyrene said quietly. He glanced up, and that slow, steady smile she'd learned to trust tugged at his mouth. "Medics said I should stay put, but I wasn't about to be on the other side of the room." Her crest feathers lifted faintly, Bayari body language for something between relief and embarrassment. "Your people, they don't leave each other, ever?" "Not if we can help it, and sometimes even when we can't." She studied him for a long moment. His skin was pale from blood loss, his body marked with bruises and cuts, all because he refused to leave her. "You broke every law of the Skyrights," she murmured. "My captain would call you a fool." Alex leaned back slightly, wincing at a healing rib. "Then I'll be your fool." Her throat tightened. She had been taught that honor was the highest calling, that death in battle was glory. But now, lying in this strange human place with the sound of his voice close by, she realized there was something beyond glory. "Alex," she said, the word careful on her tongue. "Among my people there is no word for what you've done. We have duty, we have sacrifice, but not this." She searched for the human word she had heard in his stories. "Not love." The medbay seemed to grow quieter, the hum of machines fading under the weight of the word. He didn't rush to answer. Instead, he crossed the short space between their beds, moving slowly so the medics wouldn't yell at him, and took her hand in his. His touch was warm, steady, familiar now. "You don't have to have a word for it," he said softly. "Just know it when you feel it." Her claws curled gently around his fingers. She thought of the burning city, of the bunker shadows, of the long pull across the broken streets. She thought of the way he never turned his back, not once. "I know it," she said. They stayed like that, hand in hand, as the war raged somewhere far beyond the medbay walls. For now, survival was enough. For now, the future could wait. And in that small human room, lit by sterile white light, a Bayari warrior and a human marine rested side by side, not as enemies, not as comrades, but something far rarer in the chaos of war. 2 souls who had found each other and decided, against every rule written by their people, not to let go.